We qualified nationally as a city in need, and the Department of Justice chose Tucson for their public safety partnership, which is tremendous. The Department of Justice chose us, and what that means is that the Chief of Police, Chad Kazmar, and myself and our command went in a snowstorm to Tulsa, Oklahoma in December to meet with the Department of Justice to join forces to bring federal resources and federal attention to violent crime. I mentioned the homicide data. I mentioned that stat, like going from like 60 to 117. It's not just that, it's the proliferation of firearms that we're very, very, very concerned about, very focused on. 117 homicides is way too much for us to handle, but it was the 970 non-fatal shootings that we had to deal with last year that, you know, those cases are just as important, because even though someone didn't lose their life, right, from a public safety standpoint, we treat those cases just as seriously. And so we're getting the bad news of the statistics that we're in, but it's causing attention and resources that we are embracing together to meet the demands of the day. Moving along in that direction of gaining resources, we have met the challenges of the day. The first 2 years in our Arizona legislature, our Arizona legislature, right? Let's just give a round of applause for both their uniqueness of the majority and for the brave fight that our people. I'm just so grateful to them. Every time I see them, on your behalf, on my behalf, I thank them for the job that they are undertaking and the challenge they have risen to. The first year, the Arizona legislature swept all diversion funding. And by diversion, I mean like specialty courts, like diverting people out of the criminal justice system, which is important when we're talking about mental health, mental illness, and substance use disorder, to divert them out of the system. They inexplicably wiped all diversion funding in 2021. And then in 2022, they restored it for everyone but Maricopa and Pima. Yeah. You know, just only, 75% of the state, right? So I gave up on them because I made a promise to try to launch the first restorative justice program for adults in the state, with an obvious huge note of gratitude and thanks and to the wisdom of our tribal brothers and sisters who have been using restorative justice since time immemorial. But this would be the first, American government statewide adult restorative justice. We hired our own director to make it happen. And in two months in, she got her first massive grant. And so I feel like between her, Emmanuel Fahey, she's incredible, and by virtue of having a director and having this win with a huge grant, we're going to be able to launch restorative justice. Continuing to meet the needs of the day. We talked about firearms. We handed out over 28,000 gun locks last year. That's a way in which we're meeting that need. We are generally out in the community every single Saturday and then some weeknights as well. And in addition to that, so we handed out like maybe, I think almost 6,000 our first year. But then with the help of District 5, which is Arelita Grijalva, we got permission to get into the gun shows. We would like to not have gun shows, right? The gun show loophole, we're all familiar. But while we lack the lawful way to shut them down, you make lemonade with lemons, right? So instead, we got the owners to let us in to educate on locking your gun safely if you're going to buy a gun. And so that's what shot us into like the 28,000 gun locks last year that we handed out. And we feel like that's, and I don't want you to think that we're just like handing them out like candy, like trick or treat. We are having really robust conversations. They may only last a minute, but it's a very like eye contact. It's very much, I need you to keep your family safe. And at resource fairs in town, it's, you may have a neighbor or a cousin or a sobrino or a primo or your son or whoever who really needs to be locking this gun up when they're not using it. And you understand what I'm saying, right? And these generally wonderful women, mothers, grandmothers, etc., will take the gun lock and they understand the point. And I say, this is a free gift from me. And then I need you to have kind of that like tough love conversation. And we hope we're making inroads in that way. And I'll tell you cautiously that at the end of 2022, we were afraid the homicide spike was going to match 2021, and it dipped in the last quarter, like significantly. And we kind of held our breath. And so last year was better. And then the first quarter has continued on and has been much better. We hope, after 6 months, we're hoping it's not a blip. We're cautiously optimistic that we might be coming out of it. Especially it's a lot of city of Tucson. So your sheriffs certainly are beleaguered, but the homicide detective unit, and it's now 2 units at TPD, they were exhausted, and so was our homicide unit. I am briefed on every homicide as it happens. Like in the hours that happen, I receive a briefing of kind of the who, what, when, where for every single one. But my homicide team, whoever has the homicide phone, that prosecutor reports out to the scene in real time to assess what has happened. Our victim services division, who I certainly want to highlight, they are out there providing real-time trauma crisis response to family, to eyewitnesses. And our prosecutor is assessing, they're getting briefed, they are looking at measurements, they're understanding distances, etc., that are very important a year or 2 later should the case go to trial. When we arrived in January of 2021, we inherited 144 homicide cases dating back to 2017 that had not made it to the homicide panel yet. And that was a real challenge that I did not know about or expect. The homicide panel are the bureau chiefs, every unit in the office, and the chief of detectives, and then my senior leadership, right? Like my right hand, my chief deputy, my criminal chief, and myself. I am there for every single homicide panel because I am the ultimate signature authority. We spend the morning, every Monday morning, as it came to be, reviewing 4 or 5 cases, all of the police reports, the key information. And then in the afternoon, there are very formal presentations about how each homicide should be resolved. And this is very important to have like a consensus which gets, and I credit my predecessor with this best practice so that you have a consensus. You have 200 plus years of experience in the room so that you don't have individual homicide prosecutors making individual decisions, and you could have wild disparities. That would be very, very bad. So we had to take it up to every single Monday, which was a lot to ask of these people because it's a very difficult day. It's a very emotional, challenging day to think about the loss of life just all day, every Monday. But last year alone, we got through 126 presentations. And by virtue of that, we now get to take one Monday off every month. So we have 3 on and 1 off. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. I want to get it down to every other Monday, but it's a big deal. It's a quarter less. It's a way to breathe and restore ourselves, and take care of ourselves before the next Monday comes around again. And it's so important because we need to deliver our services and our closure, the closure that we can offer to these victims' families who have been waiting since 2017. And so we are certainly highly motivated. We also have time to do this because we no longer have a capital homicide panel, because we shut that down and we no longer seek, as you guys know, I promised and I meant it. So we no longer have a capital homicide panel. And so it's an extraordinary savings of time and treasure to not be tinkering in the machinery of death, as the Supreme Court would say. And I am gratified that the state has paused. The entire state has paused because it's lonely. It's lonely to be the only county in Arizona doing a whole bunch of things that we are doing, that you want to do and that I promised to do. But it's hard. It's very hard to be the only county. And so we're going to move now to the civil side of the house for a moment. And this, because you will recall that unlike a district attorney, we don't just have the entire prosecutor firm. We have Southern Arizona's largest civil law firm under us as well. And they have been very busy. They handle mental health. The health law unit handled COVID. The employment unit handled all Pima County employees getting through COVID, the entire county. They are extraordinary attorneys who watch over all of the county from top to bottom. And one of the tasks that they unexpectedly had was that when Roe versus Wade fell under the Dobbs decision, there was a 1973 injunction in place out of Pima County Superior Court. And that injunction protected the entire state. That injunction protected reproductive health care for the entire state. Of course it did. Of course, we're going to handle everything, right? In the first 2 years, we are just going to tackle every challenge there could possibly be. That's what our people like to say. So here we were with the Attorney General at the time. You might remember his name, Brnovich, and it required me to literally switch sides from 1973. Because at the time in 73, the Pima County Attorney's Office joined the Attorney General, expressing the desire to criminally prosecute physicians and those seeking abortion, and to make it a felony crime with mandatory prison time attached. And I had to formally switch sides, which meant that I had to launch litigation directly against Brnovich himself, without the support of any other county in Arizona. It was worth it, of course, to stand on your principle. Of course, it was the right thing to do, and it was scary at times. And although we lost in the trial court, we prevailed. the Court of Appeals. We immediately got a stay, what's called a stay. So the trial court's ruling was frozen, and that allowed reproductive health care to continue in the state for a 4-month period, but only in Pima County where physicians felt safe. So it was a statewide protection, but only physicians felt safe in Pima County here with you guys, with us. Reproductive health care continued, and then the Court of Appeals ruled in our favor. Sorry. Because I'm about to get to you. Are you ready for this? The Court of Appeals ruled in our favor, right? And then reproductive health care started again statewide, in Phoenix, everywhere, because the Court of Appeals said that we were right. You and I and us, my civil chief, Sam Brown, we were right. We were legally correct. And that reproductive health should resume statewide, and it did. And the timing was perfect because of you and all of your hard work, every single one of you there in the room I can see in Continental Ranch, every single one of you on this Zoom, every single one of you who stood up and ran for office, Sonda, I'm looking at you, every single one of you who put in your blood, sweat, and tears, you flipped the state so that Chris Mays is now on my side because we have a new attorney general, because we're at the Supreme Court now, right? Because of course we are, because there is a doctor who is allowed to weigh in on behalf of all future unborn fetuses. So he is trying to continue this on in the Supreme Court in Arizona, and the Yavapai County attorney has now tried to weigh in, saying that the government in Arizona has abandoned them. So he needs to try to take us back to the full criminal prohibition law from 1864. So and of course we are fighting that, and we filed our brief in the Supreme Court last week. And so that's my way to thank you. What you do matters. I know that there are days when you feel like one person gathering signatures or one person making phone calls, but 260 votes is what took my life from Brnovich to Chris Mays. 260 votes. That's you guys. That is your blood, sweat, and tears. And I want you to feel really, really, really good about it. And with that, I'm going to finally stop talking. And I want to take whatever time you have left, whatever time you want. I want to answer whatever questions you have. Anything goes. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
A quick question. You got CD5 to do the intervention or the gun locks. What will it take for us to get CD6 into that same van as CD5?
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. So George, help me not be confused real quick. I was talking about Pima County District 5. So at the county level,
sorry,
yeah,
not congressional district. Okay.
Sorry, at the county level. And that's certainly something that, and I don't have all the numbers memorized, but obviously Matt Hines, Rex Scott has been a huge proponent of everything we can do in the firearm realm. And then Adelita was who figured out how to finesse our way into the gun shows.
Okay, we have Sanda has her hand up. Sanda, you want to unmute and ask the question?
Yes, I do. So let me lower my hand first. So Laura, I'm super excited that you are our attorney. As our attorney, I'm asking for advice because I don't know how much we can do. It horrifies me that the solutions for children not being killed in schools, Tom Horn suggests that we arm teachers. We are a sanctuary city, Tucson. Do we have any jurisdiction in Tucson area, greater Tucson area, that we can do something against this decision? That's one question that I have, and then I have a specific question about Cochise County, where the supervisors have just been ordered to pay they have been sanctioned and ordered to pay
Your attorneys.
costs for the trials, and the trial now has been moved to Pima County. I
Right,
would like to
right.
understand if there is anything that we can do as citizens to ask, how do we get to the judge, or how can we make them pay from their own pockets? I don't understand why a county has to pay legal fees for frivolous lawsuits that were uncalled for. Nobody really wanted them except Crosby and Judd. So here, these are my two questions. I have others, but I will stick with those. Thank you.
So Sonda, thank you so much. So as to the first question about Tom Horn, what I will, yeah, what I will say is that TUSD is probably going to be in the any of the districts within the city of Tucson limits are going to be in a decent position, I think, to have the power under what's called kind of a city charter to take actions that they want to take. The county suffers and we struggle because the county is more of a legal entity under the state. So the city of Tucson enjoys some freedoms, some liberties as a charter city, and can do things that we have not been able to copy as a county. I mean, we can, but then the state is free to, and they absolutely come after us and start charging us by the day, or threatening to strip our budget, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like a line of direct power that when we continue to be under the legislature that we have. So I like to say just one. So we're starting a campaign for 2024, just one. We could flip the legislature, right?
Yes.
And again, Sonda, and now I see Paul, and like people who have been so brave and have run.
She might be
you
brave
have
again, Laura, so get ready.
All right.
I might ask for another endorsement from you.
That's right.
Okay, we got Mike
so-
Norman, another candidate that ran, has a question. Mike, you want to mute and ask your
Oh,
question?
Good.
Yeah, hi. I
Good.
think you may have touched on it, but as I understand it, the county is really a child, an entity of the state. And we see that recently they've made several attempts to come in and interfere with budgets and policies. And
Yep.
they've been pushed back. But, you look at what's happening in Tennessee and other states where the Republicans dominate. You've got minority ruling the majority. I just wonder how long it's going to be until they're successful. And are you concerned about this?
I am. You're absolutely right. I mean, you said it right. That's a much better metaphor, that we are like a child under
Yeah.
like the parental control of the state legislature. And I mean, I do see a bright future for us. I do think we could flip things in 2024, but in the meantime, we are trapped. Now, what I will just tag on to Sonda's second question, and I will say that I do think the courts are getting tired they're losing tolerance and patience with the frivolous lawsuits. And I think they're starting to push back a little bit on making people pay for, especially when their own attorney is repeatedly and publicly telling them, this is illegal, you will get in trouble, you are costing the county liability, et cetera, and you are now going against legal advice. I'm afraid we had that last week in Pima, and I hope it will be the end of that, because it's terribly costly. So I do see some like areas of pushback, but on the national level, Mike, I'm very concerned about the legislators in Tennessee, and maybe we know about that. The district attorneys in Georgia. If you have heard about that, look, that is shocking. I mean, these are these are very like undemocratic moves, right? They're moves to strip people of power who have been democratically elected. We should be very concerned and very vigilant, if that's the word.
Okay, we got a question from the audience.
I have a question, but first I wanted to make the comment, as far as the fact that Tucson is a charter city, because I know that the legislature last year tried to get rid of that status. So now I have a thorough understanding of why they did. My question
Right.
is, you had mentioned when you were talking about felony murders and the capital panel, and I want to know what that was and the difference between that and how you're handling things now.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I'm happy to clarify. I can say that the death penalty in Arizona has been rife with problems, and I'm happy to get into the problems, but that would be another hour of my academic study. But it's been problematic is how I viewed it as a candidate. So I avowed that we would not be seeking that. If I were to win, we would not seek the death penalty in Pima County for whatever time I had in office. And, I want you to know that Arizona has natural life on the books, meaning life without parole, without even the chance of parole. And so, in the sense that is capital punishment, right? It's just very slow. It's life in the Department of Corrections forever until you pass away naturally. So it's, I don't know how brave it was, but maybe it was in Arizona. So I came into office as a candidate. There were the county had really ramped up seeking the death penalty in the last few years. So there were a ton of cases. As a candidate, there were 4 open cases. By the time I came into office, there were two still open pending cases. I had long, delicate, multi-hour conversations with multiple sections of family victims of those 2 cases before gently decertifying them so that the death penalty was no longer on the table. I've had a 3rd case come back from the Supreme Court of Arizona that we decertified, and it was the same thing. I worked many hours with the family. It was interesting. I think the widow was glad that the death penalty was gone, but mom and I enjoy a relationship, and she gave me grace even though she didn't agree. Surprisingly, the troops were really glad, the prosecutors were glad to be rid of it, because it is incredibly draining of resources and time. They can't handle other cases very well because they're so mired in a death penalty case. It simplified everything and allowed them to kind of return to the work that they want to be doing, because it sort of takes that circus aspect out of the courtroom. And that's been our experience so far. Maybe easier than I thought it would be. Does that answer the question?
Okay, that was a yes.
Yeah.
I've got one question, and then I'm gonna call on Paul, and we'll come back to the room.
Yeah.
How was your backlog? I know during COVID you got so backlogged because you couldn't take cases. How have you been able to clean most of those up?
Yes, I mentioned the homicide backlog, and we're really making great progress. But even just on all trials, right? Because the court just stopped doing trials.
Sure, yeah.
Period. We didn't want to call. They didn't want to call juries downtown, et cetera. And we have been in trial a lot. And I'm saying 3 or 4 or 5 trials simultaneously every week. And it's exhausting, but it's working. So it's more of I worry for my people. I try to find ways to get them rest. They're practically like soldiers at war. And this is so extraordinary for me to be here right now, because in order to be here, I have to literally hand over statutory authority to my civil chief. So we don't take time away. We just don't. And we're trying to reinstill that and trying to reinstill health and wellness in them, because that is a lot of hard work. So the good news is that the backlog is really making way. It's making progress. And I'm just trying to make sure my people are okay.
Well, and that's why we said, if you're willing to come online, we appreciate it, because I know you work so hard at so much of what you do. I will call on Paul Stapleton Smith, if you'll unmute yourself and ask your question, Paul.
If I may, Laura Conover, we could not be more proud and so grateful for your courage, your pragmatism, and the service that you provide. We're in just the most horrendous times for our people, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
And on the topic of interagency cooperation, you mentioned Chris Mays, spoke recently with Sandra Kennedy. We talked about using our federal allies. And the city of Tucson has a new labor standards unit, but could we work on, and the question is, what is the status of the enforcement and investigation of worker misclassification and wage theft? And the back end of that is, this is not accusatory, but how can we be helpful, and is interagency cooperation or initiatives? Again, Chris Mays, brilliant warrior for all of us. How can we be most helpful to attack that massive problem for our working families?
Paul, I really appreciate the question. Everywhere I go, like Cesar Chavez day, the march we had a couple weeks ago, PALF, of course, everywhere we go, I say that we need to figure out some kind of intermediary way to bring wage theft cases to my new fraud unit. So we're here, but like individual employees, they can't bring their cases, I sense, because they're putting their job at risk, their income and their livelihood. We have to figure out like an intermediary way. We have to go one step further. It was, I was hopeful, or I don't know, naive. I mean, let's be honest, right? I'm here to learn. And I had hoped that my brand new fraud unit would be like the end all be all. And like, you could just put your complaint in my form online, and that's great, right? And obviously it's really working for scam and fraud. It's awesome for that. But for wage theft, I think we have to move into phase 2. And I said PALF, Pima Area Labor Federation, just for those of us not in the know, we need like our union reps to maybe have some kind of intermediary way to bring wage theft to us, so that people aren't, thank you, Lois, people aren't at risk of everything, right? Of like throwing their life on the line to report wage theft. We're going to have something more, because I'll tell you, Paul, to my knowledge, and I need to check again, but to my knowledge, we've only had one major, huge, like felony indictment on wage theft. And it was because it was like a whole group of workers who got, they could like safety in numbers, right? So so Paul, thank you so much. I want to keep working on this.
Can you give us your link to your webpage?
Yes.
Good things on there for the audience.
Thank you. It should be www.pcao, which is Pima County Attorney's Office, right? pcao.pima.gov. I think that's us, or Google Pima County Attorney's Office. And thank you so much for asking, George, because you're going to see the fraud report form under like a fraud tab at the top, and it should be easy to find my year 2 in review that we published in January as like a report out of all of 2022. I'd love for you to look at that. And you can follow the county attorney's office on Facebook if you're on Facebook, or Twitter, or Instagram. I never figured out Instagram. I'm not a tech person or a social media person. Or me on Twitter. I put a lot of criminal justice updates on Twitter. because and also on both on the website and on Facebook, you can look at my Friday afternoon week in review. So every Friday afternoon for like 119 weeks now. That's crazy to me. 119 weeks. Oh my gosh. So 119 times every Friday afternoon, I put out the week in justice. And it's like, it's short. It's like 2 or 3 paragraphs usually. And it says what happened in justice the previous week in Pima County. And I would be most pleased to share that with you in my effort to try to report out as much as we can.
Okay, we have another question from the audience.
George, can you repeat that? It's not coming through for some reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
She was asking about what agency or how do you go about facilitating these gun laws? Is it a particular group or?
Oh, that distributing the gun locks? It's
is.
me.
Yeah,
It's
you, I
me.
figured it was. The other part of that question is, you're at the gun shows. Is it a possibility to be anyplace else, like schools or
Yeah.
convention centers or something?
Yeah. So, okay. So 88 crime, interestingly, you guys have heard of 88 crime, I'm sure, like to anonymously report a crime. 88 crime is actually housed in my agency. So that's like yet another division of my office. And they are very tied to law enforcement. They kind of have a cachet and relationships. So they are perfect to get into areas that maybe I personally can't really get away with. So they go into the gun shows for me largely, and other places that they've always been, and they hand out a ton of gun locks. When I'm out on Saturdays, I'm at schools, resource fairs, like employment fairs, like neighborhood associations. We do neighborhood cleanups many Saturday mornings, and we hand out gun locks there. And we also now are a distributor for Narcan. So my office partnered with the health department on gun locks and Narcan. And we hand out Narcan, which is just a simple, it's amazing. Some people call it magic. It's a simple nose spray, like a Flonase. It's just a simple nose pump, and which can reverse an opioid overdose, like right in front of you. It does look like a miracle. It does look like bringing back someone from the dead. And so we are trying to get Narcan into every first aid kit across the county and in like school nurses' offices and everywhere. And we talked about collaboration earlier. I don't know what it was like before, but the chief and the sheriff and I are in constant contact. The chief and I probably talk two or three nights a week. The sheriff and I at least once a week. Just a lot of contact, because it has to be. We are all public safety. And we don't agree on everything, and that's okay. We support each other and we do everything we can. So the three of us did a PSA. We did a public service announcement about Narcan called like Make the Call. Every second counts. If you are witnessing an overdose, call 911. We have a Good Samaritan law in Arizona. You will not be in trouble. Call 911. And it went into the buses and on YouTube, and I don't know, all the places like where the people are, that we are, so you probably haven't seen it, but that's okay, because it's where it needs to be. And I'm now known as the Narcan lady sometimes when I go out in public, and I love it. It means it worked. I love it. And it's a really excellent collaboration that I think should be reassuring to everyone for public safety. I saw something in the chat, Paul. Thank you so much. It should be at our website, pcao.pima.gov. I think there's a place where you can, oh, Paul, you put the link. Oh my gosh.
Thank you,
Where you
Paul.
can, yeah, I have a, so you can see the archive of the every Friday afternoon. And then there's a monthly newsletter that's like a little bit more detailed at the end of every month.
Follow-up question on your gun lock. We're just
Yeah,
wanting
yeah.
to know the status on how you're seeing the success. Do you have follow-up on that or any stats on how successful you're being with it? Or is it just let's get as many out there as we can right now?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know how to quantify. I don't know how to analyze that particular data point. And I'm such a data geek. I don't know how to, I mean, we like to say that all that effort, if it saved one life in Pima County, we don't even care. But I wish I knew how to analyze that. I don't know. I don't know yet. And I'm open. And if you have an idea of how we could figure out whether the gun locks work, I think unfortunately it would require reporting of like really delicate matters. I don't know. Maybe it could be an 88 crime thing where you could call anonymously to 88 crime and say, I want you to know about the gun lock working in an incident in our home or in our family. I would love your suggestions because I haven't figured that one out yet.
Are there any other questions from anybody online?
So,
Jennifer, you have a question? Unmute yourself and go ahead and ask.
Okay, Laura, I don't own a gun, don't know anything about them. What does a gun lock look like and how does it work?
It's interesting, Jennifer. It looks like a bike lock. So some people will
Oh.
confuse it. It's a loop and it literally just disables the gun. You can't pull the trigger anymore. Like if it's looped in, the gun is just disabled until you remove the lock. And it's just a beautiful thing.
And so what do you have, like a key to unlock it for the person who?
I can't remember if it's a key or a combination.
Well, whatever.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah.
Oh. Okay, so only the
effective,
owner
very
of the gun,
effective.
and so kids can't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so Jennifer, we get them into pediatricians' offices
Wow.
for well checkups because they ask, is there a firearm in the home? That's like on a child welfare. I happen to know because he's 9. If you
Yeah.
guys got to see him earlier.
Yes.
And that's a question on your well check with your pediatrician.
Oh.
And so then it's perfect because the pediatrician just says, oh, that's wonderful. And then they just go, like, hey, like, here's a free gift to take home.
Oh, what a great idea. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
bet,
Do you have any
of
questions
course.
from the audience?
Not a question, a comment. Congratulations. The good news is if it's working, you won't know about it. The good news is that the drop in gun, deaths and gunshots and things like that are showing that it is working. So take those statistics as proof that it is working.
God bless you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you guys. You guys, this was my absolute pleasure. I committed to you first. I thought about not coming down because you guys are special to me. You guys are special to me. You know who you are. You know who you are in the room. And I can't thank you enough. And this was really special to share. I'm sending you ocean breezes. I'm sending them to you. And I'll see you again, maybe in the winter, let's say in person. Okay. But in the meantime,
Go dip your toe in the ocean. We're envious. So have a good one. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. You are special to us all. Anybody there around?
Godspeed, all of you. Godspeed.
Feliz Pascua.
Before you all go,
Amen. Muchísimas gracias. Muchísimas gracias. La
De
Pascua
nada.
mañana.